Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Amit Harari, and coming up in today's newscast. Father and son brutally murdered by terrorist gunmen in Huwara. Their hometown and the whole country is mourning. U.S. Secretary of State and Israeli minister strategizing on Saudi normalization and Palestinian confidence building. And finally, Israeli windsurfers achieving historic double victory with gold and silver at World Sailing Championships. The IDF is still searching for the terrorist gunman who shot and killed the father and his son yesterday in the Palestinian town of Huwara. The army is also working to prevent potential vigilante attacks by the Jewish residents. During disturbances, an Israeli man was moderately wounded by IDF gunfire while throwing stones at Palestinian cars. And ILTV's Steve Leibovich reports.
Father and son, Shai Negreker and Aviad Nir, murdered yesterday by a terrorist gunman in Huwara, were today laid to rest in Ashdod. The father and son made the trip from Ashdod to Huwara in Samaria in order to have their car fixed and cleaned. A lone terrorist gunman suddenly approached and shot and killed both men from point-blank range. Shai Silas Negraker was aged 60 and his son Aviad Nir aged 20. They were both declared dead at the scene. The gunman fled and the IDF launched a manhunt while also preparing for potential vigilante revenge attacks. Roads around the area were closed as the search continued. The two men arrived in Huwara several hours before the attack. They took their car to a garage next to the car wash. The attack occurred as the pair were standing by their car while it was being washed. The Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror groups both praised the attack. Top army commanders, including the head of the IDF Central Command, Major General Yehuda Fuchs, and IDF Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, visited the scene. Halevi later briefed Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, who instructed the IDF and Shin Bet to amplify efforts to secure roads and communities while the search continues for the murderer. Huwara has long been a flashpoint in Samaria, as a main road through town is used regularly by Israelis traveling to and from their homes in nearby settlements. Plans to build a bypass road have dragged for years. The IDF generally does not maintain major presence in Huwara on Saturdays, as the vast majority of settlers in the area are observant Jews and do not drive on the Sabbath. In an unusual incident, the IDF opened fire at a group of masked Jews throwing stones at Palestinian vehicles. One of the men was shot in the leg and was taken to hospital in moderate condition. Only after the arrest did it become clear that he was a Jew and not a Palestinian.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
And joining us now on this horrifying tragedy and more is former head of the military's prosecution office for Judea and Samaria, Lieutenant Colonel Reserves and attorney Maurice Hirsch. Maurice, after all of the terrorist incidents in Huwara, does it even make sense that Israeli civilians would enter the area to receive service on their car or on anything else?
Well, so I have to say that on the one hand, I cannot rule out, and we should never rule out, the ability of any Israeli to travel freely and safely all around Judea and Samaria, even into the main Palestinian cities, in the same way as the Arab citizens of Israel and the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who enter Israel every single day can freely walk around without any fear. On the other hand, I have to say that Huwara is a hotbed of terror activity. Its proximity to Shechem is something which really lends itself to more violence. And the idea of going there to get a car wash to save 20 shekel is just outrageous to me.
You know, factually, it is improving itself, as we're saying now. You know, on Saturdays, the IDF thins out forces in Huwara because few Jews living in the area do not drive on the Shabbat. Doesn't even make sense to allow Israelis to enter. I mean, is there any reason an Israeli would need to be there on a Saturday?
I mean, just to understand the geographical area of Huwara, when you're coming north from the Tapuach junction, when you're going up towards all of the villages around and all of the cities around and Israeli settlements around that area of Nablus, of Shechem, you have no choice but to go through the middle of Huwara. And obviously not everyone in all of those areas is necessarily religious. So you're going to have a constant movement of Israelis going through that area. And again, it shouldn't be something which is problematic. They shouldn't be stopping. They shouldn't be the subject of terrorist attacks. That should be the way that we coexist. But unfortunately, that's not the case, and that has to be taken into account.
What's so special, Maurice? Maybe special is not the correct word, but multiple terror attacks in Huwara just in recent months. I'm not sure we heard that much about Huwara in recent years like we unfortunately do now.
I think what we're seeing now really is just an upturn in all of the violence. Like I said, Huwara is what in army terms is called a kill zone. You have to go straight through the middle of Huwara, and whilst there has always been, and really in the last 2-3 years, there's been a tremendous amount of violence, ever growing violence in that area, and attacks on Israeli cars and policemen and soldiers in that area. Unfortunately, that's something that we're now seeing as more and more violence as the terrorists have really realized we can attack here almost with impunity, run off back into Shechem, and there enjoy the city of refuge where it's unlikely that we'll be caught, or at least not immediately caught, for quite an extensive period of time, so they can carry on with their terrorist activities, and they enjoy the support of the local population that hides them and defends them and helps them get away.
Definitely, this is what we're seeing now. An unusual incident took place when masked Jewish vigilantes were throwing stones at Palestinian cars, and they were shot at by IDF troops, and one man was seriously injured. Are Jewish vigilantes making the army's job much more difficult?
Without question. I think that the involvement of the Jews attacking the Palestinian cars is something that needs to be dealt with really with the full force of the law. This is something which is unacceptable, even in response to the brutal execution of the father and his son. This is something that terrorists do. Jews are not terrorists, and we don't, and that's not the way that Israeli citizens should be behaving. And really, those small minority of people are giving and fueling an entire delegitimization campaign of the international community against the Israeli presence in Judea and Samaria, what they call the violent settlers. There are some 560,000 to 600,000 Israeli citizens living in Judea and Samaria, and a small minority of them are indeed violent and are indeed involved in acts of terrorism. And they are giving a bad name to everybody and allowing the international community to draw these generalizations and to delegitimize what is a tremendously law-abiding, decent population simply by their actions, which aren't condoned by anyone and are really rejected by 99.9% of both Israeli society and of the Israeli presence in Yudav.
There have been a series of IDF operations, but the number of dead killed by terrorists in Judea and Samaria is continuing to grow. The stick does not seem to be working. I mean, are there other measures Israel could be taking to lower the tensions and perhaps lower finally the motivation for terror?
What we're seeing is that Israel doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different response. I think someone defined that equation before, and it's quite appropriate for us as well. If you see what's going on in the Palestinian areas, the continued incitement. I saw a video just yesterday of armed gunmen walking down the main streets of Jenin, hundreds of them. The same things are happening in the other areas under the Palestinian Authority. There is no effort on the side of the Palestinian Authority to in any way combat terror, in any way to arrest. That's simply unthinkable. The terrorists. What the PA is doing for public relations is saying, well, we've arrested a few members of Hamas, we've confiscated a few weapons, but really what happens, that's the revolving door. Those same terrorists are immediately let out. The weapons that were seized from Hamas are then given to the Fatah, to the Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigade's terrorists. And therefore we see that entire cycle of violence and incitement and weaponization of the Palestinians and the absence of any desire of the Palestinian Authority to do anything, continuing on. And Israel's doing what it possibly can. But at the same time, we're trying to tell ourselves, well, the importance of the security coordination is so high that we have to try and ensure it at all costs. This is something which we have to admit to ourselves isn't working anymore. The Palestinian Authority has no more authority to activate any type of law enforcement, and we need to go in and do the work that the Palestinian Authority had committed to do, is committed to do, simply because they're allowing terrorists to run freely all over. And the result is an ever-growing number of Israeli deaths.
Maurice, a sad reality. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.